plan today was to stop at the small Monument Valley Airport for lunch, and even that was dramatic, as beyond the landing strip, a huge vertical rock face of several hundred feet erupted straight out of the ground. A missed landing would render a go-round a hazardous undertaking in any aircraft. The short strip wouldn't have been a problem for modern planes, but it was very narrow, and coming in on close approach with a tail dragger like the Stearman, there was no forward visibility, and after touching down, I couldn't see the runway ahead of me. I came in blind and kept it straight with my feet on the rudder, using my peripheral vision to maintain the direction. In the thin air at this high altitude, the ground roll felt fast, but the Stearman soon drew to a halt with a pronounced upslope and some firm braking. I hadn't realised beforehand that where we landed was the location for several westerns, and a scattering of tourists had gathered to take pictures with an Indian chief on a horse in the foreground. In another time-lapse, it was as though we had stumbled into the 19th century, and even the Stearman represented an impossible modernity. Nearby was an old stagecoach, gaily painted yellow and red, and positioned on a terrace with the famous landscape as a backdrop. Next to it was a flagpole with the stars and stripes blazing against the vivid blue sky, and below it was a handwritten sign bearing the legend, "God Bless America." Standing there in that moment of time and space, I felt in some way we shared this benediction. "It's like the evolution of mail delivery encapsulated right here," I said, surveying this scene. First there was the Pony Express, then the stagecoach, and then the groundbreaking airmail pilots in biplanes. And now here we are again. We got airborne half an hour later, taking off downhill towards the open terrain. It was late afternoon when we decided to make a refuelling stop at Winslow before embarking on our final flight of the day to Phoenix. Once again there was a surprise in store, as only when we landed did I realise the airport's full name was Winslow Lindbergh, after the pioneering aviator who was also one of the most famous US airmail pilots. Charles Lindbergh helped develop the route after his historic solo Atlantic crossing in the spirit of St. Louis. The airport's sole hangar was an airmail relic from the heady days of the late 1920s, so held enormous historical significance for me. We delayed our takeoff and spent the next hour filming in and around the hangar, one of the most original from the period, and it was stirring to imagine the tall, spare figure of Lindbergh with his sheath of maps on this very spot. I could scarcely believe the day I was having, and I knew then that I would remember every second of it. Still on a high from the spectacular scenery I'd witnessed, I waxed on about how special it had all been. "Listen," Pat said, "if you like that, you'll love what's not far from here." "What's that?" I asked, my curiosity stoked. "Around 15 miles to the west of here is a big crater. It's nearly a mile wide, a perfect circle. It was supposedly blown out by a meteor strike." "You are kidding me." I had read about this meteor strike, which had occurred during the Pleistocene age, nearly 2 million years ago. There was a time when geologists speculated that this was the meteor that caused the extinction of the dinosaurs, and I was thrilled to discover it was so close. It seemed another marvellous coincidence, and the thought of flying over it in this radiant sunset would be the perfect finale to this most memorable of days. I climbed in, still in a beatific mood, and eager for one last awe-inspiring sight. At 5:10 p.m. we were ready for takeoff. The conditions could not have been better. The late sun cast a golden luminosity over the desert, and as we took off towards the west, with a light crosswind from the north. The only consideration was the altitude. Winslow lies at 4,941 feet above sea level, and the warm temperature meant it would be the usual thin air or high-density altitude for the takeoff with an aspirated piston engine. For any aviator, takeoff is one of the most critical points, the time when you don't want anything to go wrong, and whenever you fly, the possibility that something could is always there at the back of your mind. In the early days of aviation, crashing was an occupational hazard and a relatively common event. Charles Lindbergh famously jumped out of 4 aeroplanes, not, it should be said, the Spirit of St. Louis, when he was an airmail pilot, and, of course, 2 of the most famous female pilots.